Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I'm John Lincove.
I'm Jake Fisher.
And I'm Mike Monticello.
And this episode, we're going to be talking about something that we like to do as a hobby, but we've also luckily been able to merge our hobby into our work. And that's we're going to talk about bike racks, because you may not know this, but the three of us are huge in the biking world. And if by biking world, I mean the CR biking world. So of the three of us, Andrew Belize and Ryan Pizolkowski, we're the three biggest bikers. So naturally, it just fell to us to talk about this. And we did a test recently, or evaluation, excuse me. We looked at a bunch of different bike racks, bunch of different types of racks to talk to people, in the boom of cycling that came up during COVID times. How do you get your bike around? Mike, I know you're joining us from your bike shop, come garage, come basement, office. Tell us about your history of biking, because it's pretty extensive, all joking aside.
Yeah, well, I've been riding and racing road bikes and mountain bikes for, close to 30 years now. And it started out as a passion, I guess. People might say maybe it's become an obsession with my bicycles, but I think it's a great form of exercise. And, when you throw mountain biking into it, you've got skills that you need to have, and just the speed, just like as with cars, the speed is still what attracts me. But I also love, pushing yourself to the limit. That's why, I love climbing hills, like doing the, Mount Washington bicycle hill climb and things like that. But I don't do as much racing these days as I used to. It's more still about just the riding, the enjoyment, the fitness. Yeah, I love it. And it remains a huge passion, and I hope it will for years down the road.
Jake, you're in it. You do a lot besides biking. I'll just kind of tease that out there. But, tell the listeners about your biking and other activities.
I like to ride a bicycle. Yeah, I mean, I road bike, mountain bike, triathlon. So I do a lot of triathlon. I just did a Ironman. I know you have to announce that when you do that, but I
Where's
love
the
my
tattoo?
tri-bike.
Is the tattoo?
I know. No, I'm supposed
here?
to. I think you put it on your calf. I think that's the rules. And yeah, mountain biking. I do actually a bunch of triathlon. Last night I was out doing a triathlon. It's a mountain bike triathlon, and with mountain biking, certainly you got to go out. I mean, for road biking, and it's like we plan routes from our house, because we're, sometimes riding 100 miles or something, we'll just get there. But for mountain biking, you do want to go out to the trails. So you got to figure out a way to transport it. And for us, it's a little bit weird because we're always driving a different one of the test cars, and you can't always, have your car set up. So I think when, Consumer Reports was like, hey, we should start looking at bike racks, we were like raising our hands like, well, we got a bunch of cars and we got bikes that need to get places. Yeah. So we were the right ones to do it.
Like you said, that's a great segue. You should be hosting the show. It just worked because, we have the cars. We have the ability to do that. We have the bikes. They have the car, whatever you want to do. My biking, like Monty said, I road bike, do some gravel riding as well. More of the, in the gravel trails here, and then some big stuff like the D2R2 up in Massachusetts. And there's something I'm doing in Vermont this year that seems to be a race I somehow got myself into. Anyhow, we did, we'll get out of the banter and we'll go right to the types of racks. We looked at some of the available racks because there are a lot out there. You've got your roof racks, the old standbys. You've got the suction cup mount type that, you just stick on the roof or the window of a hatchback, the C-sucker. Yeah. I couldn't remember the exact name. The trunk strap one that everyone sees that, it's for a hatchback or even an SUV, and, the cables and the pull straps and all that. So we didn't look at any of those. We said no to those. What we did look at are some hitch-mounted types, so a platform one and a hanging one. So, the bikes are suspended. And we looked at tailgate mats, because tailgate mats for pickup trucks are huge. They've blown up. I don't mountain bike, but mountain biking community, I mean, if you go to any trailhead, you see these everywhere. Everyone's got a pickup truck that's got 3 or 4 bikes hanging off the back. Jake, Mike, who wants to take it first? Why did we look at these exact types and ignore some of the other ones?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I mean, we actually, Mike and I, and we actually have friends at bike shops, and we did some research, and we researched what's selling and what's popular, and these are the types that people are buying now. And part of the reason is just we've seen a shift in what people drive, right? I mean, back in the day, we all had sedans, and we had roof mounted bike racks, or we had ones that are hanging off the trunk. And those worked, and we all have those, right? I mean, we've tried those. I have the one that goes on the trunk, and they got the straps, and it's a little hokey, and sometimes the straps come off. But today, with SUVs so popular, that's and pickup trucks so popular, and those types of people who go to the trailhead, tend to get those vehicles. It is no wonder that those are such popular choices. And we felt it really made sense to do a test of those. I mean, in terms of the roof mounts, I mean, you will see those around. We had done some testing. And when it comes to fuel economy, there's some reasons not to get those roof mounted ones. They just really, really decimate your fuel economy. And even when you take the bikes off, having that rack, even if you have the wind, thing. I mean,
yeah, the little wind deflector supposedly in the front.
Yeah. They really hurt the fuel economy because when it comes to driving on the highway, it's really all about aerodynamics, really.
Sure. Can I just make a plug for? Well, first of all, I want to say yes. We all grew up with the trunk mounted racks and the roof racks for sure. I mean, when I first started mountain biking, I had the trunk rack first, and then later on, I got and road riding, and then I got the roof rack. But again, I had a car back then, and like you said, this shift to SUVs has changed. No one wants to have to lift way up onto that SUV to put their bike on a roof. But there still are some benefits to those roof racks, right? Because for one thing, it's easy to lock the bicycles onto the rack. It's easy to lock the rack onto the car. Once you've got the rack on the car, they don't hang off the back of the car. Right. And it doesn't interfere with you opening your trunk or your lift gate on your SUV. So I will say there still are some benefits to those, but absolute shift away from those and to hitch mounted racks without question. I think it was a 36% increase in hitch mounted racks from 2020 to 2021 because this is just, and I'll say this. I remember it used to be cool when you would see like a Porsche 911 or Porsche Cayman with a roof rack, right? And a bicycle on top. Last weekend, I saw a new Chevrolet Corvette with a hitch mounted rack with a mountain bike on the back. A new Corvette. I could not believe it. I wish I couldn't get up to it. He was several cars ahead, so I couldn't see exactly how the setup was and whether it was a hanging hitch mounted rack or a platform rack. But anyway, that was the first for me.
We talked about the different types. So what were some of the conclusions? I mean, we all know the conclusions. I'm just teasing this up, but we came to some conclusions on the different types because we went across the whole almost a whole spectrum of pricing. And for people who go to our website, Mike has written 2 very extensive pieces. First of all, about what we found, then also more of a primer, if you will, on bike racks. So at consumerreports.org, if you just search on bike racks, you'll find his stories on there. But we tested a range, Mike, of prices and styles. So can you go into a little bit of that and give some background why?
Absolutely. So I think we learned several things by doing this. And I think the first one is that the way to go for most people is a hitch mounted platform style rack because it's first of all, it's very easy to load, and it's also easy to take on and off your car because all you have to do is just if you have a hitch, you're good to go. You just slide it in, lock it on. If you don't have a hitch, it doesn't matter if your car is not rated to tow a trailer. Pretty much any car or vehicle can have a hitch put on it, so that's not an issue.
A Corvette,
Corvette, right? So and then we found that they're just so much more secure when they're on this style of rack versus a hanging hitch mounted rack, or for sure a trunk mounted rack. And also, most of them, it's easy to lock them on in some type of a locking system. And also, it depends on the rack, but the better ones, for instance, we evaluated this Kuat NV 2.0. It spaces out the bikes more, and because almost any rack, one of your biggest issues is going to be, are the bike parts going to touch each other? And especially once you start getting into some expensive bicycles, it's one thing with like an old beater bike or something that maybe you're just taking to the beach or for a vacation or something. But for those of us who are more into the enthusiast side of mountain biking and road riding and whatever, the bicycles can get expensive, and you don't want to scratch the thing just because you're transporting it somewhere. So we found that's the way to go. If you have a pickup, it's a no-brainer. And Jake knew this before we even did this test, because he, I believe, has some tailgate pads for our test pickups. He's been doing this for a while, but this is without question the simplest way to haul a bicycle. There's no quicker way, Jake, would you agree, with putting a bicycle on a carrier than this tailgate pad?
Oh, and it's so secure. It's so, you don't have to worry about it. I mean, they're not going anywhere. There's not shaking around. I was just using our Maverick hybrid last night and transporting 4 mountain bikes. I've transported road bikes with it. I mean, it's a small pickup truck, but no problem. Line up 4 or 5 mountain bikes in the back and just super secure. And for a smaller pickup truck, it's actually better because you don't have to lift so high.
Some of these racks are pretty pricey. I mean, the Kuat, which is slickly done, and it comes as a base with a 2 bike platform, and then you could add on another 2, and others do that. That's how much money, why do I want to do that versus spending just the minimum amount and getting that strap hanging one, or, getting some kind of cheapie. What's the advantage to spending a little more besides just the spacing of the bikes?
Well, the advantage with the Kuat anyway is that it's so well built. It also looks really cool. I mean, they did some anodized like orange and stuff on there. It looks really neat, but it is so secure. We used one that was a cheaper form of this platform style. And John, I know, don't deny this, when you drove your bikes home from the track and when I drove my bikes home from the track, the first like ditch I went over near the track, I thought that either the hitch or the bikes weren't secured correctly because the thing shook up and down so much. So that's the benefit with going with a better built, better designed form of rack, right? And that's why in the story you'll see why we say this about the Kuat. And if you're going to spend a lot of money on your bikes, you might as well spend a lot of money. Well, I shouldn't say you shouldn't spend money just for the sake of spending money, but you should make sure you're getting a good quality rack because, John, you said, I think in your notes on the thing, you spent more time looking in your rearview mirror than you were at the road ahead when you were driving the one with the cheaper platform.
Yeah.
So
I own 2 Saris racks. One is a very simple 2 bike one with an arm that comes up that you lock them into on the down tube, and that was far more secure than this other 2 bike tray or 3 bike tray thing that we had. And it's, so it's not as if I didn't know how to install it. I mean, I've put bike racks on a personal vehicle and all that. And I know we had some commenters say like, well, that's, designed so that the bike doesn't absorb the impacts. Like, no, that every other bike rack is secure. This one just rattles around.
It was the Bell Right Up 350, and that's the one that we're talking about that we put on the back of our one of our F-150s, and it also again, read the story. There are some other issues with it besides but the main thing was that it just felt and looked so rickety, and it scared the pants off you every time. I'm sorry, it scared the Lycra off you every time you went over a big and the bikes would kind of shake slightly, wobble at speed. So, Jake, you're going to say something, I'm sure, much more eloquent than what I was just saying. But basically, make sure you get a good quality rack that was designed well and that spaces your bikes slightly as far apart as you can, because you don't want expensive parts touching each other.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a decent mountain bike and you've got pedals with spikes on them, imagine those up against the frame of the bike next to it. It ain't pleasant. I mean, the nice thing, again, we have all these vehicles. I mean, I took the Kuat, I put it on our Pathfinder, took it out with 4 mountain bikes up to the trails, and it's a lot of weight. You don't even notice it there. You don't even hear it. You have no idea it's there until you're looking at it. The only reason I knew it was because, we put it in reverse, all of a sudden you go beep, 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 the backup sensors. So I got really good at, and this is something you should also know if you have a late model vehicle, if you do have one of these, get good at knowing how to turn off the backup sensors and the rear automatic braking if you have that too, because that could be a surprise.
Yeah. And also it's going to, it's so any of these most of these hitch mounted racks, and even some of the tailgate pads for the pickups, it kind of depends on your vehicle, will potentially mostly block, partially block, completely block the backup camera. So you need to know that going in. But the other thing we learned is that e-bikes, electric bikes, A, they're heavy, and B, there are now specific bike racks designed for them for two reasons. One, because they're heavy. These things are like 50 to 65 pounds. And so they're actually pretty difficult to lift up and put on a bike rack. And two, some of them, like the one we tested or evaluated, the Thule Easy Fold XT platform hitch rack, actually has a little plastic ramp that it stows inside the rack, which is really neat. That then you can kind of like drive, the mountain bike up, and it does make it easier. We did find a few issues with that. Like, it's actually a little hard. The ramp is so steep and so narrow that it's a little bit flimsy. It's not exactly. It's hard to keep the bike on the rack, especially when you're backing it back down. But I'd still say it's better than trying to lift that thing, because Jake got a e-bike for us to kind of fiddle with this thing, and I was surprised how heavy they were, really.
And they get a lot heavier than that. It's interesting with e-bikes, because a lot of people are kind of looking at e-bikes and are like, okay, well, I want to get into it, and maybe I'm not the fittest person, or something like that. And then it's like, okay, now I got to get my e-bike on the roof of my car.
Right.
That you throw out your back before you hit the trail.
Yeah.
Well, and another reason you want to go, whether it's an e-bike or even just a hybrid or specific, certainly a mountain bike, the down tubes now, the top tube now, and just the way even some of the down tubes are shaped, make it very difficult to put them on a hanging rack. You see everyone. I'm going to hazard a guess that everyone who's listening to this or watching this has seen that family on vacation where they have 4 bikes or 5 bikes hanging off the back of their truck or whatever. And the bikes are like 8, 12 different angles, and there's tires that are straight up in the air. And
one's upside down,
because those, the hanging racks, which have 2 prongs that go out, and they can be secure. I kind of like the Yakima that we had. The one we used had articulated out of the way, so you could open up the hatch of the SUV while you, while you had the bikes up there. But my bikes, the triangle is kind of normal, a road bike and a gravel bike. All those other, it's kind of buyer beware or user beware, when you get that. And, you definitely, it's one of the things to consider, the traditional look versus how kind of outrageous the tube shapes are on your bike. If you're going to choose a rack, definitely go with a platform or a tray rack, over one of those.
The other thing about those, the hanging racks, so one of my mountain bikes, one of my full suspension mountain bikes, that's usually the ones you're going to have problems with because of the way, they're all designed differently. My Santa Cruz Tallboy has a very angled top tube, plus the rear shock is mounted kind of high. And so on one of the hanging hitch racks, it was basically impossible to mount it. The other one, for whatever reason, it worked pretty well. And also, I will say they usually sell adapters for these hanging racks so that you can fit these oddly styled bikes on there. But the other thing is with the hanging racks, and this same thing you're going to have with a trunk mounted rack, is that you're going to need to use some bungee cords to keep wheels from spinning around, to keep pedals from spinning and hitting pieces of the bikes. And also, you just don't want wheels spinning constantly. And also, the handlebars are going to flop around. Again, that's a hanging version. And that's, again, why we think the platform really is the way to go, because especially with that Kuat, nothing is touching anything on the bike that could damage it, right? The front tire is really secured with this piece of the rack. It locks down onto the front tire, and the rear wheel is secured just by this thing that cinches down on that. Nothing else is touching the bike. So no way, nothing's going to get scratched.
One final thing with this, what to think about, because going back to the e-bike discussion, not every rack is rated to carry an e-bike, and that's something that people should keep in mind. Particularly if they're looking for their next bike is maybe in a few years. Okay, so what you're buying, if you are considering an e-bike, you think an e-bike is going to be in your future, definitely keep that in mind. We have online, we have our best bike rack story, how to choose and use racks. We also have how bike racks affect a car's fuel economy. All those are on consumerreports.org. Check them out. They'll be linked in the show notes as well. So, make a great decision, but also tell us, if you can, tell us in the comments what racks you have. We know there's One Up. We know there's Saris, there's Yakima, there's Thule, there's all kinds of other ones. Tell us what you would like to see, and if there's something that we can add to a future evaluation of bike racks.
Tell us what you think about e-bikes, because we're looking into e-bikes, to doing more stuff on consumerreports.org. I'd like to know what people think of them, and how interested are they? How intrigued are they by them? Do they think it's cheating? Or do they think this is really a good thing for getting people who maybe don't like climbing hills or whatever to get out there? And what do they think about them? Keep in mind, they also do cost quite a bit too.
That brings us to our audience question for the week. And as always, we welcome your questions. We welcome your comments. Send them to us, talkingcars@icloud.com. So send the bike questions, send the bike comments, send the rack questions, talkingcars@icloud.com. This week's question comes from a gentleman named Michael. Michael's from Toronto. And he says, my first real road bike was a 10-speed, which was a huge advancement over my Sturmey Archer Raleigh 3-speed. Now I have a 20-speed Shimano road bike. The advantages are obvious. Smoother shifting and the ability to select the best gear for the load. Automobiles used to have 2- and 3-speed automatic transmissions. Now they have 10-speed transmissions, with the benefits being smoother shifting, better power delivery, and improved fuel economy. A CVT, continuously variable transmission, provides all these benefits and more, with the ability to select an infinite number of gears. So why are they so reviled? The one in my Toyota Hybrid works beautifully. So, Michael, thank you for the question. Jake, Mr. Transmission himself, Mr. Gear, Mr. Straight block gears in the back on his tri-bike. He runs like a 58 up front or something like that. Tell us about why CVTs are so reviled or not.
Awesome question. And I love getting into it. More gear, more better, right? I mean, the more options you have, you absolutely can optimize fuel economy, acceleration, and all those things. And actually, CVTs do those things well. CVTs do perform very well. They do give you good acceleration. They do give you fuel economy because of that wide range of gears. The reason why a lot of people don't like them has nothing to do with the performance. What it actually has to do is with the experience. So the experience of it is normally even normal transmission, even if you have 10 gears, engine revs up, you go faster. And you hear that, we'd all do the sounds. With a CVT, you have a weird kind of experience that a lot of people aren't used to, where it's almost like this rubber bandish kind of what the engine is doing doesn't really necessarily relate to your speed. So it can make it actually hard. So even in like the Toyota CVTs, I'll give you a great example. I came back from a ski trip on it was a Highlander hybrid. And when you're driving along on ice, you immediately know if the engine flares, oh geez, I'm slipping. You don't know that with the CVT because the engine could just rev up because it needs to for some other reason. So you don't have that feedback of actually what's going on. So sometimes the engine's going down while you accelerate, and it's just a weird experience. So it's really about experience, the sound. It's not really about the performance.
I was going to say, if you've ever ridden or driven a snowmobile, and if you haven't, you should, it's going to sound like that, where you hit the throttle pretty hard and the revs go way up, but you're not really accelerating that much more quickly. And that's where that kind of rubber. So if, go drive a snowmobile and you see what we're talking about. But that is exactly what Jake's talking about. And that is what annoys people. And that's why so many CVTs these days have started implementing kind of simulated shifts. It's not truly shifting, but it's bringing the revs back down so that you don't get this kind of moderate to hard acceleration moments where it might be going up to 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 RPM and just holding it there, unlike a traditional automatic that would start, upshifting and bringing the revs back down. It's going to hold it there until you pretty much back way off the throttle. The other thing is, I was for sure one of you nerdos was going to say, when Michael talked about his 10-speed and his 20-speed, well, actually, it's not a 10-speed because there's some overlap on the gears between the big ring and the small ring. But I guess I'm the nerdo. So
you're the bike nerdo for sure. But I just want to get back to one thing you said about the fake shifts. And here's a funny thing that we did right when we first started seeing cars with the fake shifts. So basically, just like you said, CVT, but it pretends that it has fixed gear ratios. So you hear that, right? we actually did some measurements when we first started seeing that. And some cars will have a sport mode and it'll put in those fake shifts. When you put it in sport mode, it accelerates slower. So you actually get the best acceleration if you get that rubber bandy engines revving high. You put in the fake shifts, it actually doesn't perform as well. But again, that experience makes it feel sportier. So,
well, as always, thanks for watching this episode. Again, send your questions to us, talkingcars@icloud.com. This episode is produced by David Abrams and edited by Anatoly Shumsky. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.